You guys need me to move one way or another? You turn on another light. How's the lighting? Is it okay?
No, you look great. It's very crystal clear. When you do get a chance, let's do a mic check on you to make sure your audio is coming through. Good.
Yeah. Hello, hello. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. I'm still having a hard
Great.
time.
You sound
Welcome one and all to another day here at the Damage Report. I'm John Iadarola. Today is a Tuesday, a wild news Tuesday. We do have one thing going for us though, and that thing is not the news. What it is the presence of Senator Nina Turner. Nina, as always, thank you for being here.
Good to be with you, John. And that upbeat intro music gets me going every time.
I know. Thank God we have that. It doesn't necessarily match how I feel sometimes about the news, as I've been watching the updates on some of the stories that we're going to be talking about roll in, but it does help a little bit. Although, I hesitate to even say this to you because I'm not sure I want it to be ruined for you as it was ruined for me. But a couple years ago, J.R. Jackson told me that it's the exact same beat as in My Sharona, and I've never really recovered from that. But anyway. That's what JR said.
You made it your own, though. That's okay.
Exactly. Well, in any event, thank you for being here. And to all of you out there, thank you for being here as well, regardless of what platform you're watching on. We're glad to have you here. We've got an awesome hour coming up with Nina Turner, where we're going to be breaking down the ridiculous threats against AOC, updates on the Ahmaud Arbery case. We've got voting and gerrymandering and what's up with Biden? Nothing good, but maybe we can provide some advice for him. And then you can stick around for the last half hour. I'm going to be breaking down some of these stories involving Dennis Prager attempting to rewrite the history of how the LGBTQ plus community was treated here in the US during the 80s. Kellyanne Conway wants to make some bold claims about what was going on in the Trump administration. We'll be talking about the partisan COVID death gap as well. So there's a lot coming up. Please hit the like button and share the stream if you haven't already. And you can send us tweets, comments, super chats, all that, and we will respond as we go. But with that said, Nina Turner, ready to talk about this stuff?
Ready.
But am I? I always ask the co-host. I should ask myself. But anyway, let's talk about this. Yes. Yesterday, a representative and American troglodyte Paul Gosar decided to appeal to the bloodlust of his followers by tweeting out a video in the style of the anime Attack on Titan, where he and other right-wingers murder Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Joe Biden, and others. I'm not going to show you the whole video, but just so that you understand the context of this, here's a bit of what this congressperson tweeted out on his official congressional social media. Okay, so it's like 1:30, and Nina Turner, are you familiar with Attack on Titan? I don't know how popular it's been the past few years. Are you familiar with the anime that's based on?
No.
So the basic idea is that humanity is stuck in a walled off city, and there are these massive mindless beasts coming at it that need to be killed at all costs. So in this case, that threat that's assaulting the last city of humanity was footage of immigrants. So they are the beasts that must be murdered in the context of Attack on Titan. And Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was one of them. And a lot of the headlines about this are saying that Paul Gosar presented himself as killing AOC, which is true, his face is on there. But you'll note in that footage, Lauren Boebert is also the character that kills Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Marjorie Greene gets to be the character that murders Congressperson Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Then later in the video, they do the same to Joe Biden. They kill President Joe Biden as well. So he tweeted this out, by the way, with any anime fans out there, because he definitely is an anime fan. He knows what Attack on Titan is, definitely. And that is what Twitter put up. It's hateful conduct, but it might be in the public interest, so they're keeping it up there. I don't know if it's in the public interest. I do know it's in his interest, but what did you make of this?
Yeah, I don't know how that is in the public interest. And these they've really gone too far, but they are just examples of what's animating the minds of some people in this country. But certainly we want to hold elected officials to a higher standard, especially when it comes to interactions, not only with their colleagues, but even what we put out into the public domain. And this really is, and I'm being gentle here, this is really pretty much a bridge too far. It's unacceptable in every single way. and they should be checked for this. How can you serve next to somebody and you putting out that you want to be the one to kill them? And then again, marginalizing immigrants like they always do, continuing stoking the flames of the other. They're coming for our stuff. They're dangerous. The representative is dangerous, and this kind of thought process is dangerous.
Yeah, 100%. Also ruins one of the few animes I've watched. I used to like that show. But anyway, as I said in the pre-show, the 3rd and 4th season also kind of ruined it for me. But anyway, so I've worked through the course of my life many jobs. Right now, I'm whatever the hell this career field is. But before this, I worked as a tutor. I've worked as a waiter in Tex-Mex, Indian and Italian restaurants. I've been a caterer. I worked at a toy store for a while. And so my question to the audience is, in which of those jobs could I post a video of me photoshopping myself as murdering my coworkers and I would keep that job? Would they still let me sell toys if I had presented myself as murdering the other people who worked at All Wound Up, the toy store in the Northeast that no longer exists? If I showed myself murdering the bartender at the Italian restaurant I worked at, would I still have that job? And look, I had a lot of responsibility as an Italian waiter. I would argue Congress people have slightly more. So maybe the standards should be slightly higher, and yet they are infinitely lower. They're calling, we'll get to the tweets where they call for him to resign, but I'm gonna jump out in front of it and say, I don't think there's a damn chance of there being any consequences against him for this. What do you think?
No, there won't. I mean, the strongest consequence that we have since the leadership of the GOP, even if they do anything, is gonna be totally superficial. The only real consequence that we actually have is the ballot box. So whether or not the voters in the states that these 3 represented, because he put himself with some others to participate in the murder, whether or not the voters in that state and whether or not somebody's gonna rise up, even another Republican will rise up in those states and run against them. That's the true consequence.
And this is the guy who's his family put out an ad of like he had more family members in this ad saying don't elect him than I know of my family, and yet that wasn't enough. They said he's a monster. You can't trust him in a position of power, and they were 100% right.
Maybe now I want to run against them, John.
That would be great, but they'd probably have to win a Republican primary. And Paul Gosar, he isn't risking his future by doing this. He is delivering one of the only things the right wants. They want the glorification of violence. All of these viral videos are like that. If it's Trump being Thanos and wiping out half the Democrats with snapping his fingers, or the Empire Strikes Back, like the Death Star or whatever, or if it's him beating the hell out of reporters, they don't have to deliver for their audience because their audience has been trained to just want the glorification of violence. And for some, it comes in this form. It's like, oh, it's just a joke. It's just an anime video. For some, it's following QAnon, the end stage of which is the gathering up of all their political opponents and having them all gunned down in mass. But it always comes back to the only thing I want, the only thing I need you to promise me is that there's possibly a time coming where these Democrats I've been taught to hate are gonna finally die. And we covered on shows like this, and then I guess we just have to continue with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and Chuck Schumer as the counterweight to an increasingly bloodthirsty fascist party. So what are we supposed to do, Nina? And I say this to you, I say this to the audience too. What the hell are we supposed to do? How is a democracy supposed to survive when people like this can not only continue with this rhetoric, but that's the best thing he can do for his career is to picture. He should have just had a CGI of him, literally Paul Gosar, choking the life out of Ilhan Omar. Why not? Are his fans gonna turn on him if he does that? No. Why would they?
No, they're not. This is neoliberalism, neo-fascism. One is a quicker death, the other one is slower. There's a day of reckoning, and every single day something like this happens or something else that reminds us that the politics in this country, that not even just the politics, like if you think of it from a moral perspective, who Why would you do something like this already knowing that there is such a divide that has been percolating, I would argue, John, for a very long time? I think that just the election of President Trump, or Donald J. Trump as president of the United States of America, just brought it more up to the surface. But if we really analyze decades upon decades upon decades, this kind of divide, this kind of animus was always there under the surface. Trump just gave it permission to come to the top, and people like Gosar and the others, Marjorie Taylor Greene, the others, they keep sealing it with a good housekeeping seal of approval that allows them and the people who thirst for this to continue along this path. They are the ones that are the worst, because as leaders, no matter if they disagree with their colleagues on policy, why does it have to turn into this?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And look, I don't have a great answer to the question or whatever, but
no, me either.
Yeah,
John, but there was a time. Can I just say one other thing? There was a time when there were duels, as you know, in this country, right? The politicians would just go out and duel one another, and you would think that in the 21st century we would evolve a little more than what we have at this point, and it is very clear that we have not.
Yeah, looks like we're devolving. Look, the answer obviously isn't more Paul Gosars and Donald Trump. So that wing of this supposed, it's not even a part of the movement. It's just a grift thing. I obviously don't agree in, but we clearly can't just have the Bidens and the Pelosi's. And this is not just in this clip. We're gonna do multiple stories today. The through line of which is they will not stand against this in a variety of ways. So we have to fight off the fascists, obviously, that should go without saying, but we desperately have to get out the Bidens and the Chuck Schumers and the Pelosi's and all of them, because they will not save us from this.
No.
Okay, AOC has responded to the video that Paul Gosar put out of him and other wackadoodle right-wingers literally murdering her. She tweeted, so while I was en route to Glasgow, a creepy member I work with who fundraises for neo-Nazi groups shared a fantasy video of him killing me. And he'll face no consequences because GOP leader cheers him on with excuses. Fun Monday, well, back to work because institutions don't protect women of color. She's 100% there, 100% right there. She goes on, remember when Yoho accosted me on the Capitol and called me an effing bitch? Remember when Green ran after me a few months ago screaming and reaching for her? Remember when she stalked my office the first time with insurrectionists and people locked inside? All at my job and nothing ever happens. I assume most of our audience remembers that. Just in case, I wanna show you a brief bit of, this is back in 2019, before we elevated her from crazy rando to crazy rando congresswoman. Here is Marjorie Greene.
To Crazy Ocasio, you come to this little thing and you open it up and you whisper into her. Session. This is confession. This is Ocasio confession right there.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I'm an American citizen.
This is creepy.
It's hide and seek.
This is, huh?
Hide and seek.
It's hide and seek. Tag, you're it. Guess what? You can't stay in there forever. Can you come out and play? Let's go.
All right, so I guess she got the message before.
And since then, she's gone on to become a congressperson. The guys in the video either are participating in the insurrection or eventually will be locked up for plotting to murder congresspeople, I'm sure. And this is what she has been dealing with. And she and others, there's threats against Rashida Tlaib and Ayanna Pressley and Ilhan Omar constantly.
Yeah.
There will never be any
Corey
protection.
Bush too.
Corey Bush as well, yes.
Bush. Yeah.
And they're just supposed to take it. And we're supposed to hope that it'll just stop it stalking them in their office and anime videos. That eventually one of the crazy people that follow them, who have more guns than brain cells, won't eventually do something. And I dread that every single day. There have already been attacks against politicians, obviously, Gabby Giffords and all that. But I'm just terrified that the leadership doesn't care. They just leave these women out there to protect themselves.
No, they don't care. They're not using their power to make an example of this person. This should just not happen. In no world is this acceptable at all. And we just gonna have to just settle in on that. Let that rest right there. In no way is this acceptable. to make physical threats of violence against your coworker or anybody for that matter, John. And I love the examples that you opened up with, because there is no job on the earth except for this one that you could openly threaten to kill your coworker or coworkers and still have your damn job.
Yeah, and
without consequence.
Either the video. Like, look at all of what it took for Marjorie Greene to just lose her committee hearings. She literally just said, it wasn't anime like she just said, Pelosi needs a bullet in the head. And that by itself clearly wasn't enough. You needed all of this stuff, the yellow star and the allusions to the Holocaust and the Jewish space lasers and the QAnon and yeah, I think Hillary Clinton ate a baby's face once, and all of that together took her off her committee hearings and freed her up to be, crazy independently more. And that's it.
And she got rewarded because that video you showed, right, was her before she was elected to Congress. So that is the reward. That kind of crazy gets you elected to Congress in some cases.
100%. AOC's final tweet was, this dude is just a collection of wet toothpicks anyway. White supremacy is for extremely fragile people and sad men like him, whose self-concept relies on the myth that he was born superior because deep down he knows he couldn't open a pickle jar or read a whole book by himself. I like that, and I love that AOC can joke a bit when I know that she must be terrified constantly of all of these crazies. And it's totally true. I mean, that's what these myths are designed to take people and give them a false sense of their own superiority. I would argue that if you were truly superior, if you were truly strong, you would perhaps, as a representative, deliver for your constituents and not just tweet out anime videos of you killing people personally.
How about that? And some people are more predisposed to believe in this kind of stuff for real. And it just gives people license to maybe try to do this for real. And that in lies the problem.
100%. Ilhan Omar tweeted, this man should not serve in Congress. She's totally right. Ted Lieu actually tweeted about it early on. And he makes the point too, that in any other workplace, you wouldn't be allowed to do that. They're not gonna let you keep stocking the shelves at like Bass Pro Shops if you fantasize about killing the cashier. We have no standards whatsoever for the people that we give the most power to. And to cover for this, because all of the right-wing media is gonna cover for this, they say, well, Kathy Griffin years ago, she made a threat against Trump. That's true, and I have never voted for her for Congress since then, to be fair. She never served on a committee, actually. She's a random entertainer. And she actually suffered consequences, by the way. Despite not being a congressperson, she effectively, if anybody got canceled for something they said, she basically disappeared for a few years. And again, not a congressperson, notably. A random guy came up to Tucker Carlson in a sporting goods store and talked very reasonably to him. No threats, no anything. And the right lost their mind over that. There was no videos of him decapitating Tucker Carlson or anything like that.
The hypocrisy is thick. And look, I didn't agree with Kathy Griffin. She is a comedian though. So if she was doing that in her comedic role, some people may say, oh, that's distasteful. But we know comedians, they really press it. They go beyond what sometimes is acceptable. Even then, I did not agree with it. But your point is very well taken. The difference between her being a comedian and if people were, rooting for that. No, I don't agree with that. That's their right to root for that. But I didn't, even though it was Donald J. Trump. I didn't like it. She is a comedian. So I'm gonna put that right there. But these folks we talking about right now serve in the United States Congress and they sit side by side. Kathy Griffin doesn't sit side by side with President Donald J. Trump again, even though I didn't agree with it. But these people that she got to come in contact with these fools on a regular basis. They hold enormous amount of power and people follow and listen to them and they could trigger somebody again that may be predisposed to this kind of behavior and they're making it seem like it is okay. It is not okay. Just like it's not okay for a cashier at a fast food restaurant or anywhere else, a car wash, wherever people are, to threaten their coworkers. It's not okay for Congress people to either threaten them directly or indirectly threaten them through an anime video. It's not okay.
Can I ask you a quick question? You ran for Congress, and I feel like if you want to, you will end up in Congress. You will be as outspoken, if not more outspoken, than any member of Congress on many of these same issues.
Bringing the heat.
Exactly. Are you at all worried about, because like they're gonna lose their minds, their heads are gonna explode when they see you, when they listen to you. Are you worried about that sort of thing?
I know that could be the reality. I mean, I am friends with many, I have associates in that Congress, because there's a difference. Hello, everybody ain't your friend. And I do have friends, and I have deep relationships with a lot of people, especially some of the members of the squad. And my heart aches about what is happening to them. But I would say the same thing if it was reversed. If people were making threats on our side against Congress members like that, it is not acceptable. This is not about who's Republican or Democrat, who's progressive or not. This is about common human decency. But yeah, John, I've thought about it. I ended up, and I don't talk about this a lot, but it was the guy, this was maybe about 2 years ago, that they caught. He had the van, and he had a whole list of people from President Obama to, a whole bunch of people on his list. Senator Sanders was on that list. I ended up on this guy's list too.
Oh, geez.
And I was a commentator on CNN at the time. And I remember my neighbors, coming up to me and my husband saying, the FBI was outside your house, and, getting the message. They even reached out to my son, who's in law enforcement. We're looking. And sure enough, to let me know that I was on that list. So absolutely. You definitely have to think about that kind of stuff. It causes you to pause and kind of reflect. And why? And that's what I mean. People like that guy who are predisposed to be triggered by this kind of stuff because somebody of authority told them it was okay. People's very lives are in danger. You never know what might set somebody off. So why would you continue to stoke this kind of stuff? And I know people like the Congress members get it even more. Than even somebody that's in the movement like me. So I think about it often. Yeah,
I worry. I worry for future candidates, and I worry for those there right now. I see the threats, and the threats have been there for a long time. And look, it's the story of American history. Is they've been teaching working people to be suspicious of and fear those who might actually make the government work for them. The Red Scare and all that. And now it's no, fear isn't good enough. You should fantasize about murdering the only people who would ever improve the quality of your life. You should fantasize about killing them.
Yeah.
Disgusting. Okay, we're gonna take our first break. When we come back, we're gonna be talking about the updates on the trial involving the murderers of Ahmaud Arbery. We'll have that for you after this. Okay, everybody. By the way, heads up to the producers. I think you're gonna get your wish. I think we're probably gonna do just the B block in the next thing. So, Mercy, you win this round. Anyway, yeah, she's happy. Anyway, okay, let's see what's going on out there in the audience. Oh, early heads up that not only are we lucky to have Nina Turner today, and not only are you lucky, I believe on Thursday you're gonna be joining Indisputable. You've been doing, so Thursdays with Nina on Indisputable. Also Power Hour. Thursday is the most Nina-packed of all the days. Everybody knows that by now. That's available at 8 p.m. Eastern time, 5 p.m. Pacific time, available to our members. And if you're not a member, I know what you can do to change that. You can become one. Go to TOIT.com/join to find out information about that. And with that, let's see what's going on in the audience. Kelly Sharkey has been a tier 1 member for 11 months. Says happy Tuesday, John and Nina. Thanks for giving the real news, as depressing as it is. Yeah. I sometimes really fast behind the scenes stuff. One of the things I do to unwind is I do some creative writing, and I wrote most of a short story this last weekend, and it's about basically a post-apocalyptic world where the world has gone insane and it's manifested in these insane creatures and everything. And then I realized, wait, why am I recreating our politics in the thing that's supposed to be my unwinding? It's a crazy world where we're all on our own and we can't trust each other. That's our job. Anyway. Emma Deacon, welcome to Tier 1 membership on YouTube. Thank you for being here. Let's see. Musically Meg says, hate hearing kids can't get it. My mom is a medevac pilot transporting COVID patients. They're mostly kids now. They don't all make it. Heartbreaking. Jesus, that is just devastating. Sorry to hear that. Billy Bear the Bear Dragon says, don't forget about the weird anti-Semitism in Attack on Titan. I only watched the first 2 seasons. It's possible that some of that went over my head. There are definitely other issues with the series, but for now we're gonna focus on the threats against AOC, but you're right. Forrest Dudley says, my mixed feelings on a duel between AOC and Gosar aside, even that wouldn't appease them because they lose their minds when we even contemplate fighting back. No, I don't want, like, the justice isn't us creating parodies or fighting them or shooting. Like, I want a democracy that is not founded on political violence. That's what I want. Carson Rodkey says, hey Carson, I talked to Carson recently. Says, I'm gonna send a postcard to AOC with a cute picture of my dog. Hopefully it brightens her day a little bit. It's the least I can do. Everybody appreciates that. You could send it to me too, if you actually, I wouldn't mind it. Stu Pedasso says, I worked with a guy who said he would someday dance on the grave of his manager for getting overlooked for a promotion, and he was fired immediately. He never said he would kill them, but it didn't matter. Yeah, because people are worried about workplace violence in most workplaces, but not all. Suspicious Pergola says, is there not already a law that forbids elected officials from glorifying political violence? How is this legal? Do Dems need to propose new legislation against this and force Repubs to vote against it? I have no idea. And obviously, outside of clear threats of violence, there is free speech. The issue is none of the Republicans are even expressing, I would prefer if you not do that. We can't even get, I would prefer if you not do that. So sad. Sleeper's Vice Dragon hit 8 months on Twitch. Thank you for that. That's from yesterday, but thank you. A Scotland viewer, glad to have international viewers. Altec Phoenix, hey Altec, how's it going? Hit 13 months, awesome. Maximum Bossitude hit 3. That's a boss that would not allow this sort of thing in the workplace, by the way. Anyway, we got more news coming up in just a few. Paige Lars says, when has democracy ever been a part of American society? No, I get it. I get it. I just always thought it would be cool, I guess. I don't know. Everybody has to have goals. I think us having a democracy that functions would be a cool aspirational sort of thing. I'm gonna put it on my vision board. Anyway, with that, let's turn to some more unfortunate news. Just yesterday, we hit the second day in the trial of the 3 murderers, those who killed Ahmaud Arbery, and we are finding out some new information. We found out yesterday, the jury found out that Arbery's final moments consisted of a police officer arriving on the scene and once again doing one of the things that is so common in these sorts of stories, not offering any potentially life-saving aid. Prosecutors said that former Glynn County Patrol Officer Ricky Menshew, the first officer to respond to the shooting, told prosecutors he'd received a call about a quote suspicious black male in the neighborhood wearing a white t-shirt. He testified that he believed Arbery was already dead by the time he arrived. There was a shotgun laying in the grass covered in blood. He said he did not render aid to Arbery because he was the only officer present and there was no one to quote watch his back. He said he did not have medical materials on hand, but that he did call for emergency services. And look, I guess to be fair, devil's advocate, we have no idea if he would have been able to save a person who had been murdered at close range with a shotgun. And I will say that while I think cops often overly play up how terrified they are, I get a little bit why he was scared about having no one to watch his back. He was surrounded by murderers, so I sort of understand that part. But Nina, what do you think about this?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, John, that Arbery wasn't the person, obviously, because of what happened to him, unfortunately, but to be afraid of the 3 men that were on the scene. In some ways, his explanation seems reasonable to me under those particular circumstances. But I won't put a however. Most often when there are lots of police officers on the scene, they typically do not render aid. They do not perform life-saving aid because the way they are socialized is it is their job to apprehend suspects and not necessarily try to save their lives. So both of those things can be true, that this officer in this particular circumstance could be right, but far too often, more often than not, police officers don't render life-saving aid to the people that they just shot. They just don't. I mean, look what happened at Ferguson. The same thing. What happened with George Floyd? I mean, we can name Eric Garner in New York. Same thing. And there were lots of officers. We can give countless examples. Those are just a few. They just are not trained to do that.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's multiple potential explanations, none of them good. They do seem to, like he's saying there, he believed he was dead. Maybe he actually did, but I can see cops thinking, like, wanting to be able to plead ignorance. Like, because if you actually try to save a person, presumably you know more about what's going on with them. There's this very hands-off thing. They'll do anything to save their lives. They'll murder people who don't have a weapon. But when it comes to others, that urgency is seemingly very rarely there. In any event, we got a reaction to that revelation from Wanda Cooper Jones, who's the mother of Ahmaud Arbery, who told reporters, "I understood he had to go and secure the crime scene, but at the same time, he had a guy laying in the middle of the road in a puddle of blood." Exactly. Protect and serve. Saving lives seems like that would be a big part of that. Anyway, we have a little bit more information. Prosecution said that Arbery was being chased for about 5 minutes. The defense attorneys for some of the murderers say that Arbery was killed in self-defense. William Bryan, who is one of those being charged, told Officer Ricky Menshew that Arbery never spoke to him or to the McMichaels, the other two, as they followed him. Even as the three men asked who he was, where he was from, and if he'd taken anything, Arbery never said a word. William Bryan says, "I mean, this would have never happened, you know. Should I have been chasing him? I don't know." He still doesn't know if he should have been chasing a person who hadn't done anything wrong. That chase resulted in them murdering a man. He's still not sure if it was a good thing or not.
That tells you the state of mind. I mean, the fact, and this is not a one-off where Black people especially have to prove that they belong in a certain place. And this is really what this came down to. A Black man suspicious because he is Black, let's just tell the truth, and them feeling as though he did not deserve to be there. And talking, I think just even last week, Dr. Ritchie and I were talking about a segment where he reminded people about freedom papers, that there was a point in time in this country's history and not much has changed, a different way to operate, but that Black people had to prove that they had permission to be in certain places. It's the same thing almost that happened to Trayvon Martin, for example, John, that he was chased by somebody that wasn't, in the same boat. None of these people were law enforcement, but the guy said he didn't believe that he belonged there. Trayvon Martin was at his dad's house in his dad's neighborhood, and he didn't belong there. So these psyche, it's the way that we're socialized in this country. It can be implicit, explicit, but it is a subconscious reaction. And unless people deconstruct their construction, first admit it, the good, bad, and the ugly, that these things happen and that are still happening in the 21st century. We don't got to go back to the 20th century, the 19th century, or even the 18th century to know very clearly that these behaviors are still happening, and they are oftentimes justified by the types of laws that are activated in this country, and also de facto behavior. This was de facto behavior.
Yeah, you're 100% right. This guy thinks that, I can take a shotgun and I can point it to someone and say, "Where are you from?" And you have to answer. Yeah. Now, does he think that he has to do that? Does he think that if Ahmaud Arbery had gotten some members of his family together in a truck with shotguns and had stopped William Bryan, do you need to comply? That's just reasonable? I mean, there's citizens arrest laws. Ahmaud Arbery can get a shotgun and he can go and try to arrest anybody he wants, right? I have a feeling he probably does not think that that would be okay. And you're totally right, by the way, in all those examples that you gave. Like, one of the reasons I'm glad that this idea of the constant having to get involved for the worst possible reasons of like Karens that is still a part of the news is, this is the same thing, just on a different point of the spectrum. It is people policing other people's lives, generally for racist reasons. And sometimes they just call the cops on someone who's walking their dog or having a barbecue. Sometimes they grab shotguns and they jump in a truck. And sometimes they follow someone through their neighborhood because they consider themselves part of the neighborhood watch. And you see this so much. So many of these needless, like sometimes they grab an assault rifle that they shouldn't have and they travel across state lines and they murder people who are just protesting somewhere. And so we're going to keep having these as long as we produce a society that tells some white people it is your job to police the lives of everyone else around you. Even if, by the way, you're breaking all sorts of laws in doing this. You shouldn't have the gun, you shouldn't cross state lines with it, all of that. This is what you should be doing. Anyway, let's just jump to this last picture. These are the three men that decided it was on them to stop Ahmaud Arbery from jogging that day. And there is every reason to believe that these guys are gonna get off. I hope.
Look at the makeup of the jury, for Christ's sake, which we talked about.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna take another break. We'll mix it up. We're gonna be talking about, I would love to say lighter news. I apologize, but we'll be back in just a few. Okay, yeah, if all of these people had just stayed at home, just watched another episode of Wheel of Fortune or whatever, just people would be alive, that's it. If Zimmerman and Rittenhouse and these jokers had just never owned guns, never chased after people, people would be alive. And we're gonna keep having these people because these people keep getting off. Okay, Abdullah Al-Ghatani sent us in a very generous super chat. There was no message, but thank you for that. I do appreciate the support. I hope that you're enjoying the show. The Knicks Dragon says, Senator Turner, you are one of my heroes. Hello, somebody.
Hello, somebody.
Thank you, Knicks Dragon. I appreciate that. Daddy Natty, thank you. Jason, pronounced Jason, says, I noticed there are no replays in YouTube of the show. Is that an error, just a new thing? Yes, so we've talked about that in the past. It is a correction to apparently a mistake we had been making, where we had been making the videos available for about 2 years and we weren't supposed to. I am going to be advocating for us to return to that, but for now, it is available to members on basically all the platforms and all of that. So apologize for the inconvenience that might cause. Musically Meg says, OMG, can we all steal Carson Rodkey's idea? We all send AOC cute animal pics to counter the constant stream of hate, fur babies for the squad. I guess it couldn't hurt. I suppose it couldn't hurt. CC me though. Don't at me about cryptocurrency, but CC me on the cute dog pics. Okay, Musically Meg says, I'm so glad they have time to make these fun little videos in between filibusters. This has to be illegal in more than one way. Well, of course, like he says his team made it. I think that they just got it off of 4chan or something like that. But anyway, that's what he's tweeting about, and Ted Cruz is tweeting about Big Bird, and they have time to do this because they are not writing legislation. They're not researching any of this. They're not talking to people who are suffering in their states. When you don't want to do your job, you have a lot of time freed up to just appeal to the worst instincts, the darkest emotions of the electorate. Okay, Mama Bear Dragon says, we need some sort of protocol for recalling reps and senators. This is out of hand. We need a lot of things. Thank you. James Ray says, if I posted a video like that, I would be in a cell while forensics sifted my life. Did that video threaten Biden's Secret Service? Who knows? Who knows? Maybe because it included Biden, they'll take it seriously. I don't know. Okay, Mazeos Xenon hit 5 months, says yay 5 months, go Bezos bucks. On another note, have you heard about the woman in Oklahoma convicted for manslaughter because of a miscarriage? She got 4 years. Of course, this was some time ago now. Yes, absolutely unjust, but I did read about that. Vivi Greeley hit 12 months, says happy anniversary. Where has the time gone? Oh, it's passed, but thankfully we've had each other. Let's see, Farley the Legend hit 3 months, thank you, Farley. The Trenchy hit 11 months, says the reason this is even being discussed in the trial is to distract from the murder and spread the blame. Well, look, I think us understanding the timeline of what happened matters. I'm glad that we know that. I don't think that it apologizes for literally anything. It makes the entire system seem more unjust and more uncaring toward the life of Ahmaud Arbery. But we'll see. That doesn't mean I have a lot of hope for the outcome of this. Drew in Georgia says, hi, John, Nina, mods and dragons. Gonna be a lurker today. Levels are up. Just wanted to say, hey, have a great day, fam. thank you. Never feel like you have to engage or anything like that. Sometimes I wish I didn't have to engage, but you are certainly free to engage or not at whatever level you want. Finally, Red Oakie says, John, why must you fill my head with blissful images of, okay, I like your message. I'm not gonna read it, but thank you. Anyway, we got more news. Stick around. We'll be back in just a few. Sometimes it takes me until about halfway through the super chat to have sort of scanned the end of the super chat and decide that I had best not read it. So, but thank you for your support, even if I cannot put my official auditory stamp of approval on all of the messages. Anyway, with that, let's mix it up, Dina. Let's jump into some other stuff. We are still digesting all of the varied results from last week's elections, and some of them are really unfortunate, even if they're not about particular politicians being elected or not. In fact, in New York, which is supposed to be one of the most progressive states, voters turned down multiple ballot initiatives that would have made it easier to vote in a variety of ways. One of the proposals would have paved the way for lawmakers to get rid of a longstanding state policy that requires voters to give an excuse if they want to vote by mail. 34 states and the District of Columbia allow anyone to vote by mail for any reason, so New York is less progressive in a voting sense than the vast majority of states. Another would have allowed people to register to vote on election day. And so why did these sorts of common sense changes that are already law in a number of other states not get passed? Well, there are some activists in New York that believe they know why. Sarah Goff of Common Cause says there was an assumption that of course it'll pass because it's New York. And unfortunately, we woke up Wednesday morning and saw that that was definitely not true. Republicans and conservatives treated these ballot initiatives like essential threats and moved accordingly. And we just did not see that from the institutional supporters that we would have liked to. In fact, New York's Conservative Party spent $3 million opposing those ballot initiatives. Republicans traveled across the state as part of a Just Say No campaign, echoing national Republicans. They said that they needed to protect against voter fraud, even though it doesn't exist. And the state Democratic Party spent no money on the 3 ballot initiatives that would have expanded voting access, would have made this democratic state in a democratic country more of a democracy. Nina, this is what happens when only one side actually has any skin in the game.
Outrageous. And while Democrats are playing checkers, Republicans are playing chess. And the fact that the state party of New York did not invest the requisite money into giving these initiatives a fighting chance of passing. You know why they didn't? Because they were too busy comparing the candidacy of India Walton running for mayor in Buffalo to that of David Duke. That's why the hell they didn't do it. And we expand and protect access to the ballot box, John, is not that hard. Expand and protect. And Democrats are failing. They're failing on the state level of government, particularly in states where Republicans control everything, because we're not making the requisite investment in state legislatures to run candidates to stand up. So we're just getting ran over there. And then on the federal level, look at here, look at here. We got organizations, particularly Black organizations, because of the unique history of Blacks in this country, but voting rights should matter to everybody. But Black folks uniquely begging this administration and a democratically controlled Congress to get rid of the filibuster, pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the For the People Act, which both did pass the House of Representatives. Kudos to them, but it ain't, they not going anywhere in the United States Senate because of the filibuster. So I should not be surprised. We should not be surprised that in the great state of New York, the Democrats did not lift one finger, didn't do anything to try to make sure that those measures pass. What are we living in? Why would you not have no fault absentee voting in the 21st century? Why don't we just make voting election day a holiday in the United States of America while we at it? John, I am so upset about this because I ran for Secretary of State in my state in 2014, trying to push back a recalcitrant Republican whose reward for suppressing the vote, for using his power to suppress the vote, is to be lieutenant governor right now. We better wake up and get a clue. I'm just incensed, 100%. As you know.
Yeah, they didn't do anything. They were complacent or they don't care. They were Senate Dems asked the party to do something about it. They didn't do anything.
Yeah,
they just
didn't do it.
It could have easily passed. And this ties back to what I was talking about earlier. Like these are the people that are supposed to save us from this new Republican Party. They're supposed to protect us.
We're in trouble. Yeah, we're in trouble.
What's going to happen? Like you have states around the country that are suppressing the vote. And these are new levels of suppression in states that already had been doing this for decades. They're still finding new ways to make it more difficult to vote. And the Dems could solve it. They just choose not to. They like the tradition of the filibuster.
No, they like, since Shelby v. Holder, John, let's remind the people who are joining us right now, Shelby v. Holder. And you know what that was? A backlash against the election of the first Black president. Let's continue to have this truth talk here. And Republicans playing for the long game again, and Democrats playing checkers. You cannot win the presidency and the Congress and then meanwhile back in states across this country, leave state houses vulnerable, governor's mansions vulnerable to this kind of foolishness, that then when you're trying to get the very voters that you need to come out to vote, they are hindered to their access. And I mean for everybody, I don't care if they vote Republican or not. I'm talking about expanding and protecting access to the ballot box. And Republicans continue to win the argument on this. Voter, they know that the likelihood of people walking into voting places trying to imitate somebody else is slim to none. There are already laws on the books for people that will commit voter fraud. Stop playing. They committing voter fraud. Voter depression and suppression is a fraud.
Yeah, go talk to Glenn Youngkin's son, who tried to vote twice despite not being old enough to vote once. Like the problem is coming from inside of your house.
Yes.
And I don't expect the Republicans do not need to be convinced to embrace democracy. That's not going to happen. They know they can't win in a true democracy. That's why they're choking it to death. So I'm not surprised by that. I'll report on it or whatever. I'll remind you that the Republicans are doing all of this, but they're not the variable that matters. It's the Democrats. That's why, while the Democrats might philosophically, supposedly agree with us a little bit, their betrayal of these values is 100 times worse, because it's the factor that is actually the difference between us having these bills and not. We're never going to convince the Republicans, but we should hope that we should be able to convince the Democrats, especially in a state as solidly blue as New York.
Here it is.
But we can't. And let's turn to another aspect of this. We're into the redistricting process, and we have been talking for literally years about how ridiculous gerrymandering is and how it needs to be stopped. We haven't had a lot of success in getting Democrats or Republicans to stop this practice. And we're not gonna get Republicans to. I mean, they're gerrymandering the hell out of their states. So let me try to appeal to some conservatives. Do you know that the Democrats do it too? They are gerrymandering you right out of your representation. For instance, in states like Illinois. In Illinois, the Democrats have put forward their projected map that they might do. Do you know what it would do? It would give the Democrats 14 of the state's 17 House seats. That's the one they're considering. You know, they think if they're willing to be a little bit more risky, they can get 15 out of 17. Now, you might think, if you don't know this country, if you don't know Illinois, well, that probably just means that in Illinois, it's a solidly blue state. Not really, Biden won 57.5% of the vote. So look, are they owed more than half of the congressional seats? Yes, definitely. Should they have almost 100%? I don't know. What kind of democracy do you want to have, Republicans? Do you like that the Democrats in Illinois can effectively wipe out all of the conservative thought and desire for policy in an entire state? I don't want the Democrats to be able to do that. I think we should ban the practice. But let's see if you'll come aboard on that. Nina, what do you think?
Hello, somebody. Join us. Come on in.
Yes.
The water's just fine. No, you're absolutely right. Gerrymandering, whether it's done by Republicans or Democrats, is wrong. It erodes confidence, and it takes away from the voters the ability to choose their politicians. It allows politicians for the next decade to be able to choose their constituents. This is not how this is supposed to work. So come on in, let's have some bipartisan support for getting rid of gerrymandering across the board.
Exactly. It's ridiculous. This is definitely the crucial time. You can see in this map, not only, look, redistricting can happen all over the place, but some states are gonna be losing seats, some are going to be gaining seats, and you can see sort of some of the patterns if we bring up this map. And it can be independent. Like, you do have to have districts, that's true. Just maybe we shouldn't give control over the choosing of those districts to the literal people that will be occupying those seats and those who own them. That seems like a good sort of core philosophical thing. Anyway, I wanna let you know about a few of the specifics of this to give you an idea of how manipulated this is. It's not just Illinois. In 2018 in Wisconsin, former Governor Scott Walker lost by less than 30,000 statewide, or 30,000 votes statewide, a margin of just 1 percentage point. So it was a very close split election. Republicans won 63 of 99 state assembly districts. That's like damn near a supermajority, despite it being almost a perfectly split state. In Austin, Texas, where I used to live for a number of years, in the 2020 election, President Biden won Travis County, which includes Austin, by 45 percentage points. It was a crushing victory. But 5 of Austin's 6 congressional seats are occupied by Republicans. It's a practice called cracking. You take a population and you take a little bit of it and you throw it into a red district. You take another, you throw it into another one. And so effectively you have millions of people living there and they don't get a say at all. It's a great practice. It's a great practice. You can see nationally, Democrats received 1.4 million more votes in 2012 than Republicans for the House of Representatives. But Republicans retained control of the House 234 to 201. They got less than half the vote. They had an overwhelming majority in the House. And look, that sort of thing is why, of course, trying to appeal to Republicans using the example of Illinois is probably not gonna work. Again, they have no faith that they can win honest, fair elections where people are engaged and vote. They believe that they have manipulated the system enough to occasionally have power and they will cling to it, unfortunately.
Yeah, they like it grimy.
Yeah. And again, like we said, I'm not really trying to get the Republicans on board. It's not gonna happen. But maybe the Democrats could do something about this. You've been getting screwed over year after year after year. When are you going to act like you acknowledge it? When are you gonna act like it matters? Because it does.
Yeah, it's kind of hard when hypocrisy is a hell of a thing.
100%. Okay, let's close out this hour with a little bit of a talk. We're gonna provide a little bit of advice to someone who is arguably president of the United States. Not necessarily the most powerful person, but arguably president. So let's jump into this video actually directly, if we could do that.
The point is, I didn't run because of the polls. I think what you're going to see is the combination of what I did in the beginning in terms of Recovery Act, and then this legislation, as well as the legislation that we're about to pass, God willing, on what's called Build Back Better, everything from child care to funding 3- and 4-year-olds in school, et cetera. I think all that's going to have a significant impact on ordinary Americans.
So that was Joe Biden being asked about the fact that his approval rating has been going down. Bad poll results, like for instance, 58% of Americans say Joe Biden hasn't paid enough attention to the nation's most important problems, which seems bad. More than a third call the economy the most important thing. Among those group, 72% say he hasn't been attentive, which is bad. And you can try to brush that off saying you didn't run based on the polls. I don't even know what that means. Like in practice, yeah, everybody says that, doesn't mean anything. And sure, God willing, BBB will pass. We didn't elect God, actually. I think we voted for you. We gave you the power to do this. And so he can see, Nina, that his numbers are going down. It's not difficult to know why. It's in the polls. It's not difficult to imagine what might turn this around. The question is going to be, does he care to? Does he have the ability to?
Yeah, the intestinal fortitude, and God willing, God is willing. The question becomes, are politicians willing? Because I would be willing to bet, certainly the God that I serve believes in uplifting and supporting the poor, the working poor and the barely middle class. And those programs in the reconciliation portion of this bill, be to the third power portion of this bill, is what most everyday Americans actually support. They support having Medicare negotiate for lower drug prices. I think that's at about 88%. They support making sure that people get paid family leave. Absolutely support it. They support having funding for 2-year colleges, which they took out. That's not happening. So the people are on the side of the progressive agenda, and the progressive agenda is really about lifting humanity. And I would be willing to bet that God is in total support of that. So God is aligned. Politicians, are you aligned? Are you ready to do the right thing?
100%. Yeah. Yeah. And, I hope that he is. If he is, it really should not be difficult for him to figure out what he should do, but I'm willing to help. I think we could point him in the right direction. When your numbers are going down, you got to figure out something to do. Like, it's been tough for a lot of people, not just Joe Biden. Like the news business numbers have been down in 2021. Some responded to that by pushing ivermectin in their content or whatever. I have a more moral way that you can get your numbers back up. Let's jump ahead to the polling. What if there were wildly popular policies that you could champion? For instance, lowering Medicare prescription drug prices, 88% support, 12% oppose. A slam dunk, a home run, put in whatever sports analogy you want. Think about it. If you got that done, wouldn't people like that? What about Medicare coverage for dental, eye, and hearing? 84% support, 16% oppose. Paid family and medical leave, more than 70%. Universal pre-K for kids, nearly 70%. The people are not, they're not like being coy, like maybe I want something, maybe I don't, maybe I'll tell you, maybe not. No, they're being very clear, Nina, about what they want, and we're not getting it.
That's it. How about that? That's the roadmap. And all of these politicians are going to have to reckon, certainly from my faith, with there's going to be a day of reckoning. It might not happen today or tomorrow, but eventually we all will have a day of reckoning with the Creator. It is, why do you go into public service when you are not willing to totally put it all out there on the line in service to the people who have the greatest needs? The American people have spoken. And John, you just laid it out. And this political affiliation, be damned, the American people have spoken, and they want these kind of programs. And while we're patting these politicians on the back, number one, it is our money. Let me remind it. These are our tax dollars. We got to have a social contract with one another. So whether it's BIF, which is the bipartisan infrastructure, or whether it's B to the third power, it is our money. It is our social contract with one another to have these types of services. And two, what you just laid out, John, you don't even take a lot of courage to do these things because the American people are on your side.
100%. Yeah. And it's not good enough to just be like, well, yeah, I want this stuff, but Cinema and Mansion don't want it. Then you have to fight. You have to show that you're trying. Or you could you get the whole media together. I'm gonna do a primetime address, 1 hour, and I'm gonna talk about how people have generation after generation has been crushed by student loan debt, and that is why I'm canceling $50,000. You could do that. Cinema can whine about it. It's not gonna stop it from happening.
That's right. And we in a pandemic, John. Let me get that out there too.
Yeah.
There's nothing extraordinary about this stuff in the face of a pandemic. It's what we're supposed to be doing, given the weight of the moment.
Exactly. I wish we had more time, Nina. Like he desperately needs this help. Maybe we can provide some more next Tuesday. But as always, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you, John, for your fire.
Thank you. Everybody watch Power Hour and watch the rest of our show, which is coming up after this short break. Welcome back, everyone. It's just me. I'm John Iadarola. Well, it's not just me. It's also you. Thank you. If it was just me, that'd be really sad. But at least I guess Marissa would be here, so that's good. There's a few of us. Anyway, we got a lot of news we're going to talk about. I'm going to try to get through as much as I can, but it is a big old packed day. It's an early preview for Big News Wednesday. And before we get into the news, I do want to read a few of your comments. Bernie the Kiwi Dragon said, Ma Gangrene, Paul Gosar, Lauren. Okay, come on, guys. I appreciate it, but I think we can rise slightly higher. Stoneflower Dragon says, this is deep news Indica Tuesday. Thank you. The Real Jamal says, clearly not speaking of all white people. Oh, this came after. The Real Jamal's super chat says, white people find their power majority over this country slipping and they're doing everything they can to keep it. They were operating on the same morals and character that got them this land. Simple. Yes, I agree. Okay, over in the Twitch, Alaresu hit 12 months, hit a year there. Says Dragon Gods here for 1 year paying now. Keep up the good work. Thank you. Knit Fast, Die Warm. That's a name for you. Hit 11 months. Okay, what else we got? Liaton, subscribe with Prime. Thank you for being with us. VDJ, D-Rock, OKC. A lot of letters in that. Hit 5 months. Thank you for sharing your letters with us for 5 months. Also, want to welcome the new members, Alex and Emma Deacon and Gooey to tier 1. Thank you for being here. Jay Hawker, the Bald Dragon, has been here for 7 months. Says Michigan voted out gerrymandering and it's now done by an independent committee. Exactly, it's become popular over the past couple of decades, except among people who want to be able to continue to rig the system, unfortunately. Okay, with that, let's see what we can get through in the next 20 minutes or so. In the near future, you are likely to be told over and over again to not be angry if we don't get the reconciliation bill. I mean, after all, we already got the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and after all, that's got money allocated inside of it going towards climate stuff, which it does, and some of it's perfectly fine. But recently, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez made clear how little of the funding that's even in that matters if we don't have Build Back Better as well. And we want to give you an example of that because some of this funding is going towards things that are very questionably positive for the environment or downright bad, but being marketed as supposedly being solutions to the climate crisis. So take a look at this, the money that's going to be going out. The latest draft bill would make fossil fuel companies eligible for at least $25 billion in new subsidies. Literally fossil fuel companies having a significant chunk of the entire bill opened up to them in subsidies, but for what? Well, it includes billions of dollars for carbon capture, utilization and storage, hydrogen fuel made from natural gas, and low emissions buses that could run on fuels including hydrogen and natural gas. It also encourages subsidies that go unquantified in the legislation, for example, urging states to waive property taxes for pipelines to transport captured carbon. So it's hard to put an exact dollar figure on that, obviously, but I'm assuming the lobbies that got that part put in there had a feeling that it would benefit them in the long run. So look, some of these things are better than the things they will immediately replace, but we don't need a single bit of this. We don't need low emissions buses. We can have no emissions buses. We have the capacity to do that already. We don't need to, look, it's not that carbon capture couldn't help on the periphery, on the edges, or that someday we might have the technology to make it a larger scale part of this. But I very much question how soon that will be economically feasible. And I don't like that being paired with other policies that encourage states and the federal government to use more natural gas. This idea that natural gas necessarily has to be a bridge towards cleaner energy is absolute bullcrap, okay? We can do clean energy right now. This is not about building a bridge. This is about stretching out the profits for this industry as long as possible. For decades, if possible. And if that means that we lock in even more emissions, which this will do, the vast, like I'll get to some of the information, that'll do a lot of damage too. And so it's a little bit bizarre when your climate solutions part of the bill actually harms our climate even more. So let me give you a little bit more information, the background. The vast majority of clean sounding hydrogen is made from natural gas and produces the greenhouse gas carbon dioxide as a waste product. The process itself requires energy, typically supplied by burning more natural gas. That's the process of capturing, storing, all of that. And so that also produces greenhouse gases. So under a heading of let's help with the climate, you're using natural gas in multiple forms. So you can see this would be popular if you are one of those companies, if you've invested in those companies, if your campaign gets donations from these industries. But if you're a serious environmental activist, if you believe that we need a center doing something about the climate, especially in one of the few bills in our lifetime that at least even pretends to do that, this is hardly what our focus should be on. Now, if Build Back Better does get passed, there is a significantly larger amount of money that more directly deals with the climate crisis. But as of right now, at least when I'm filming this, maybe you live in some awesome future where all the promises came true and progressives weren't lied to. I hope to someday live in that world too. But as of right now, if this is all that we get when it comes to climate, then we are in for a really rough future. That's what I have to say about that. Okay, with that, let's mix things up entirely and jump into this video.
Historians will just ask, how did this happen? How did people get governed by irrational fears? Whether it is of the non-vaccinated who are the pariahs of America, as I have not seen in my lifetime, any pariah group like this. During the AIDS crisis, can you imagine if gay men and intravenous drug users, who were the vast majority of people with AIDS, had they been pariahs the way the non-vaccinated are? But it would have been inconceivable, and it should have been inconceivable. They should not have been made pariahs.
I can actually imagine that. That's the best I can do because I was born in the 80s. I don't have many memories from there. So I can imagine it. He can remember it because it very much happened, and he is exactly the sort of person to contribute to it. And we will be running through some of that evidence. That, by the way, was Dennis Prager, most notably of PragerU. And why is he notable? Well, I've always felt that Dennis Prager is like the ultimate example of the arrogance of those who own our country, because they want to propagandize to your kids, and the tool they choose to do it with is literally the last person you would ever allow to be alone with your kids. So that shows to me that they're fairly confident they can get this done even with him as their messenger. He has said a lot of truly awful things. We do not have time on the show today to do a full accounting of all of the different negative influences he's had on our country and on our political discourse in recent years, but we can at least address some of what he said there. So he had a couple of different points. One is that the unvaccinated are pariahs, that they are in some way being discriminated against, and all of it is based on unfounded fears, except that they spread COVID at higher rates. And by the way, to the extent that there is any large amount of thought given to the unvaccinated from the vaccinated, I can't speak for everyone, but I can speak for myself when I say most of my fears are for them and for their friends and for their family, because we know it's very clear. CDC has been updating this information literally on a month-by-month basis. People who are unvaccinated have at the very least a 10 to 20 times higher rate of hospitalization if they get COVID, and death if they get COVID. Anyone can still get COVID, that is true. We live in a chaotic world, but you are far more likely to get through it without a serious case and without dying if you are vaccinated. Now, he wants, of course, to get unvaccinated people who believe that their entire ideology and identity should be founded around the fact that they refuse to be a part of the solution to COVID, to like him, to watch his content. And so he makes them out to be the ultimate victim. That's most of what the right does. But in here, the example he gives is, let's try to imagine other people who are at risk of an illness, like the people who were contracting and dying from HIV, dying from AIDS. They were never stigmatized against. That is such a maddening thing. And I would hope that we live in a world that even if you're too young to have really lived through that yourself, or if you don't live here in the United States, that you would know obviously how much right-wing stigma, how much just generalized societal stigma there was of those who were suffering with HIV, or just if you were in the LGBTQ+ community. I don't think I should have to remind people that that was a very stigmatized community and continues to be to literally this day. But just in case, we're gonna go through a couple of the pieces of the evidence. So my awesome producers have found a couple of examples of what Dennis Prager himself has been saying over the decades in this topic. So back in 2008, he wrote a column for townhall.com, and here's what he said. Even the natural sciences are increasingly subject to being rendered a means to a progressive end. There was the pseudo threat of heterosexual AIDS in America. Science manipulated in order to destigmatize AIDS as primarily a gay man's disease and to increase funding for AIDS research. So virtually every 3-word segment of that is horrendous. So how dare they want to increase funding for AIDS research, he says. This guy who had so much empathy in hindsight for this community, why would you want to have research on this thing? He specifically says they wanted to destigmatize it, which he pitches as a bad thing. I wish that 2021 Dennis Prager would talk to 2008 Dennis Prager, and I wish that he would keep talking to him for a very long time so we didn't have to listen to him. But so now there was never any stigma. Then he was saying, how dare you try to destigmatize it? And by the way, the overall point that he's trying to make, this pseudo threat of heterosexual AIDS. So look, statistically, you can and you should, he definitely won't. You should learn and educate yourself about the HIV crisis and how disproportionate the effect it was on a number of different communities along racial, socioeconomic, as well as sexual identity lines. That is definitely true. But it also did affect some people who were heterosexual. And think about what he's doing there. You would think that at least what the right does is they protect people like them. He cares so little about even stopping the lower number, but still a significant number of heterosexual people who got HIV, acquired AIDS. He will even give them up to the disease in the pursuit of his ideological goals, which are stigmatizing the LGBTQ plus community and making sure that nothing is done about this. This is a convenient illness from his point of view, as recently at least as 2008. We can go back further if you want. Back in 1993, he wrote a journal on homosexuals and religion. And so it's called Homosexuality, the Bible and Us, a Jewish Perspective. And honestly, for a right winger in 1993, this is a little bit more empathic than you would expect. He's not sure whether they should totally push out the LGBTQ plus members, whether they should 100% turn them away or potentially accept them. Now note that he's not accepting them. So again, if decades later you're going to pretend that there was no stigma when you're literally like in real time trying to process, should I stigmatize them? I don't know. Maybe I'll think about it for a couple decades as they remain on the periphery of society with all the negative effects that come from that. And all of this is stuff that he should be familiar with, considering that he literally lived it. Now that's Prager. We're gonna briefly touch on society at large because again, as I said, there was a lot of stigma. Rush Limbaugh had what he called the AIDS update. Okay, so Iowa's Cedar Rapids Gazette reported back in 1990 about this segment on his show. It was a recurring segment in which he made jokes about the disease that had killed at that point more than 100,000 people. He started playing songs such as Back in the Saddle Again, Kiss Him Goodbye, I Know I'll Never Love This Way Again, and Looking for Love in All the Wrong Places. Because, and maybe I'm missing something because obviously this is very sophisticated comedy that maybe I'm not up to the task of digesting, but he thinks it's funny that gay people died. No, I'm pretty sure that that's it. I think that that's actually just as sophisticated as it is. So again, no stigma. It was just funny to some of the most listened to voices in all of conservative media in the entire country that he would have a recurring segment, the entire point of which is to mock the fact that people are dying. People on Twitter pointed out other things very briefly. There were laws requiring people with HIV who are aware of their status to disclose their status to sex partners. No word yet on whether Marjorie Greene considered that a massive violation of their HIPAA rights. You had to, in some states, require disclosure to needle sharing partners. There were a lot of things like this, and no, they didn't care about that. Their supposed like holding to some sort of medical freedom as the core of their ideology is a convenient ruse in the time of COVID. They didn't care when it was people unlike them who were, for the most part, suffering and dying. So that is the truth. Maybe the truth isn't as fun as like a throwaway comment from a rotting conservative about why you shouldn't care about those people back in the 80s, but you should totally care about those who choose not to get vaccinated and thus perpetuate the cycle of COVID, but it is at least accurate. It reflects reality. Okay, damn, we are running out of time rapidly. I apologize for this. So we're gonna do a bit of a throwback here. We're gonna pretend that it's 2018 or 2019 again. Let's play this video.
Sort of stupid and don't understand what the supply chain crisis is. I worked at that White House for 4 years. We never even heard of such a thing. There was no supply chain crisis.
That's Kellyanne Conway. You remember her? Well, how could you forget? You got to remember that she's a massive liar because she's still doing it to you right now. She says there, I think she said we never even heard of a supply chain crisis. That's weird. You should know what at least the term means. But she's implying there that under Donald Trump, there were no supply chain issues. Well, the thing is, in some ways, it feels like it was forever ago. This last year has felt really long. I still remember some of what happened literally just last year. And it turns out that there were some concerns about supply chains. Some of them were actually legal concerns. For instance, for Jared Kushner, who was sued over his failed coronavirus supply chain task force. It was so bad, he was sued over it, but Kellyanne Conway can't bother to remember that. So what was he being sued about? Well, in March, he, for some reason I'll never understand, was put in charge of all this. And so he recruited a bevy of private sector volunteers with little to no relevant experience to assist in the administration's efforts to procure medical and protective equipment that had been in short supply. They cared so little about whether this equipment was ever acquired that they gave it to Jared Kushner and he botched the entire thing, which led to some throwbacks we're gonna do here. For instance, the fact that nurses had to use snorkel masks, pool noodles, and trash bags as PPE. In the richest country in history, our nurses wore Glad bags during a pandemic. That was the issue we had with our supply chain. But look, it was definitely a medical thing. It affected that. For a period, it affected ventilators. You might have had a lot of trouble getting hand sanitizer or masks. There were massive public health related supply chain issues, but it also went way wider than that. Let's go to some random things. Did you try to buy a bicycle last year? I know it seems random, but there were massive supply chain problems in bicycles. Actually, most exercise equipment became very difficult to get. A little bit more specific to just your life in general. I'm gonna show you a picture and I want you to tell me what you think of when you see this picture. Let's go to this Cottonelle. What does that make you think of when you think of 2020? Nothing? Just the ease at getting and using toilet paper? Oh, it was smooth times. I didn't buy toilet paper from China on eBay. Nobody must have because there were no supply chain issues whatsoever. In fact, I've been trying to give some examples for Kellyanne Conway so that she can reckon a little bit with the history, the very recent history of the Trump administration. But if you want more, there is literally a section on Wikipedia of shortages related to the COVID-19 pandemic with a lot of detail. And by the way, pointing this out, aside from the stuff with Jared Kushner and the fact that Trump and Republican governors didn't care about this is not entirely on them. You can have supply chain issues during the worst pandemic of our lives. On some level, people will understand that. But if we're gonna understand that, if we're gonna extend some goodwill towards you in 2020, you should understand that we are unfortunately still in that pandemic. And it is still unfortunately affecting supply chains on a lot of different things. Rubber and steel, board games, all sorts of things, consumer products. International travel and shipping is still very difficult. And so if I can extend that to him, hopefully she can try to come to grips with why that might still be affecting things here in 2021, especially when they're the ones who are helping to continue this pandemic. Okay, that's not gonna be enough time. I appreciate that, but nah, we're gonna hang out for a couple of minutes, everybody. So anyway, Kellyanne Conway, remember when she was like a daily part of our lives? What a weird time we came through together. Anyway. There are still supply chain issues. I am very enticed by that new iPad mini. It's not in stock anywhere. It's probably saving me from purchasing it, but anyway. Okay, well, everybody, that's all the time we have for actual stories, but there's way more stuff coming up. Let me tell you about a little bit of it. First of all, Indisputable will be live in like less than 10 minutes. You've got Rashad Ritchie, you've got David Schuster. Kenneth Schrupp is gonna be on for a debate. I cannot wait to hear what he has to say about a couple of the stories we talked about on this show, actually, including, I'm assuming, that the update on the Ahmaud Arbery case. But in any event, that's gonna be coming up very soon. You also have Deep Dive with Jordan Uhl. And I know what you're thinking, wait, you mean the Jordan Uhl that got a victory royale with you back on Game Busters last Friday? Yes, that exact Jordan Uhl. And if you didn't watch that was a very stupid call of yours. You should have been watching it. It was awesome. We killed a guy as he came out of a bathroom. Anyway, also, if you're not already following us in our podcast form, it's a great backup for running, walking around town while you're shopping, working out, those sorts of things. And if you enjoy us in podcast form, you can, of course, rate us and review us on things like Apple Podcasts, that sort of thing. Anyway, with that, anything else? Oh yeah, Rebel HQ. By the way, we got great people on Rebel HQ. Adrian Lawrence, David Schuster, Richard Ojeda, who I'm gonna be interviewing in just a few. You can be a part of that awesome squad. Go to tyt.com/careers to find out about an opportunity that's available right now. Okay, go on our Twitch. Brooke just linked to our Victory Royale. I'm gonna watch it later. But anyway, that's all the time we have for our show. Thank you everybody for tuning in. If you were watching the pre-show yesterday, I had referenced that I would not be here on Wednesday. The thing that was gonna keep me away has now been postponed. So Jared Jackson will still be here, but unfortunately for you, I will be as well. So tune in for Big News Wednesdays. It'll be going as it normally does. And with that, thank you for being here. Until next time though, stay safe out there, stay sane out there, and we'll see you soon.